俾人哋戒開咗啦個底嗰度。冇啊，因為我啲大鄉嚟嘅啫嘛，唔係話冇啊， 你張被啊，啱啱洗乾淨啊，你同我攝去邊啊？攝去床啦！我琴日一拿起手，你嗰張被又雜雜啦已經，再將啲被攝曬落啲角落度啦。
Green is about to reach its third one. Purple in its ascension. Green almost to the next ascension. Red is almost in the Ascension 4, while the red is also in over a million times now. Have certain decision now. Just a certain decision. Treaty 4,742nd pace. Well, almost. White is on its way to 1,000. Also is Turquoise is in its third ascension, almost in its way to the third. Pink is in its way the ascension. Almost the ascension. Red and pink are in the ascension scenes. Pink is seen to be more expensive than that. Let's guess the next achievement will be in the 18. Make all of the multipliers to be over 1,000. To be at 15 members of Time Flux. Promote RP stage. Ascension on pink now. So the pink will make 10 times more multiplier now. 10 times the multiplier. Queen is also in the Ascension tree, almost on this way. Yeah, get that multiplier by 15 minutes at 10 bucks. Almost to a vegetarian by the way, the way upgrade is almost cost a vegetarian. It is in 996 Dolphin Decision. And scale pay time, which is the Revolution gang is already close to a low-fat vegetarian, so it maybe it's almost the time to gain a vegetarian by way. Almost. Sign is on its way on the Ascension. OOP stage run the experiment, which is 1.25. Hmm. Let me wait until the rest experiment quadrupled to 5 minutes. The most expensive of them is purple right now. No, white is not the expensive. Red is the most expensive. promote with a PlayStation. The promotion multiplayer currently is 2,200. Let me do 1,000,000 tasks in the PlayStation. Wait. Did the challenge accomplish? I did I did a triple cutter. I did a tri-cutter on You're in is Ascension Level 4.
Okay, good. First into it. 6 cells instead of 5. Diagonals are still level. Well, there are only 12 hexagonals, or a grand total of 4, more than the number of letters in the alphabet. Unlike the pentominoes, hexagonals don't really have agreed upon names. There are a handful of different ideas out there for naming schemes, such as Yang-Mi-3, and plenty more that other people have also come up with. But for the purposes of this video, I decided to make my own naming scheme, based on what each of them resembles to me. I debated doing other systems, but I figured going super technical would be really annoying for this video, and none of the already existing systems felt perfectly right to me. That is to say that this is not an official naming system for the hexagonals, so you're completely free to make up your own if you want. Anyways, here are the names of all 35 of them. You don't have to memorize them, though I did. Let's begin. Part 1. Symmetry. 20 out of the 35 hexagonals have no symmetry. Unlike the pentominoes, this is over half of them. 6 of the 35 hexagonals have one axis of symmetry. They are the seesaw, the bracket, top hat, long T, the cross, and the heart. 2 of the 35 hexagonals have one axis of symmetry but diagonal, and those are alpha and fighter jet. 2 of the hexagonals have 2 axes of symmetry, being long I and the box. A total of 7 hexagonals have rotational symmetry, all of which are 180-degree rotational symmetry. This includes both hexagonals with 2 axes of symmetry, then the integral, $sign, double N, the hurricane, and the staircase. Just like last time, here's a Venn diagram of symmetry. Any hexagonals that are not on here contain no symmetry whatsoever. So sad. Part 2. Tiling. All 35 hexagonals can tile the plane, and all 35 can do it in an infinite number of ways. I am going to show you exactly how for all of them in increasing levels of difficulty. Obviously, long I and the box are rectangles, so they instantly have an infinite number of tilings. 6 more of the hexagonals can have 2 or more copies joined together to form rectangles, being long L, long P, fighter jet, polar bear, uneven U, and top hat. Just like with the pentominoes, if you can create infinitely long straight lines with hexagonals, then you can shift each row around however much you want, which creates infinite tilings. The majority of hexagonals fall into this category. Hurricane, long Y, seesaw, long N, and double N can all create infinite rows that are 2 cells tall. Staircase, bracket, pointer, delta, and heart can all create infinite rows that are 3 cells tall. Square root, 1, 3, low 4, and golf club can all create infinite rows that are 4 cells tall. And finally, long F can create infinite rows that are 6 cells tall. The next category is a little bit strange. Let's take the alpha hexagonal. While you can't create an infinite straight line with it, you can create these infinitely long rows. With these rows, the top part does line up with the bottom part, so you can connect an infinite number of these rows together. You'd think that this would lead to an infinite number of solutions, right? Well, no, because if you take every row and move it over so it fits again, it's still exactly the same, and everything lines up. What you need to do is have a different arrangement of the same hexagonal and line them up. This is row 1, and this is row 2, and then you can mix and match the rows infinitely. 1, 2, 2, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, etc, etc. The alpha does this, but also the cross, the duck, uneven T, high 4, and the dollar. Moving on to even more complicated tilings, the integral and big L cannot create 2 separate horizontal lines, but they can create 2 separate 1-to-1 diagonal lines that perfectly connect together, meaning you can mix and match to your heart's content. Then, these final 3 hexagonals are the most difficult of them all. 7 creates 2 separate 1-to-2 diagonal rows that can be mixed and matched. This can be a little bit hard to comprehend, but if you look here, you can see both of the separate rows overlaid on top of each other. The hook can create 2 separate 2-to-2 diagonal rows that can be mixed and matched. Once again, this is a little bit hard to visually comprehend, so here are both of them overlaid on top of each other. Finally, long T, which creates 2 separate 3-to-3 diagonal rows that can be mixed and matched. This one is a lot easier to conceptualize, but I'll still show you the version with both overlaid for peace of mind. So yeah, all 35 hexagonals tile the plane in an infinite number of ways. Part 3. Other tilings. Firstly, I slightly lied in the last one. I said that only 6 of the hexagonals can be joined together to form a rectangle, when in actuality 8 of them can. The only issue is the other 2 are a little bit more complicated. But anyways, moving on, with 35 hexagonals and 6 cells per hexagonal, that leaves a grand total of 210 cells. 210 is a pretty composite number and can form 8 different sizes of rectangles. Can you create different rectangles with all 35 hexagonals?
No.
Unfortunately, the answer is no, it is not possible, but this can be proved pretty easily with parity. Let's take a smaller board, for example, 30 cells. With 30 cells, you can make a handful of different configurations, but in every single one, when you checkerboard it, there's an identical number of black and white cells. This is true for every single even-sized board. There will always be an equal number of black and white cells when you checkerboard it. When you place hexomenos over these cells, there are two options for what happens. Option 1, it covers 3 cells of one color and 3 cells of another color. Option 2, it covers 4 cells of one color and 2 cells of another color. Between these two options, most hexomenos fall into category 1, where no matter where you place them on a checkerboard, they'll cover 3 black cells and 3 white cells. These 24 fall into that group. That leaves 11 hexomenos remaining, which are all the 4-2 pattern. Since the final board needs to have an equal number of black and white cells covered, that means that when you have one of these 11 hexomenos covering 4 white cells and 2 black cells, you need to have another one basically paired up with that one covering 2 black cells and 4 white cells, so that together they combine to cover 6 cells of each color, effectively cancelling each other out. However, with 11 hexomenos in this category, you can only pair up 10 of them into 5 groups, leaving one lone one, which will always have to cover up either 2 black and 4 white, or 4 black and 2 white. This means that one type of cell will always have to have 2 more than the other type, effectively making it completely impossible to use all 35 hexomenos to create a rectangle. So sad. Part 4. All 210 cells. I'm going to take this category in a slightly different direction than I did in pentomino hacks. I've colored all 210 cells of the 35 hexomenos into 4 different categories. Red cells connect to exactly one other cell in that hexomino. Yellow cells connect to exactly 2 other cells. Green cells connect to exactly 3 other cells, and cyan cells connect to exactly 4. This comes with several categories of hexomenos. These 13 all contain exactly 2 red cells and 4 yellow cells. They're basically all hexomino snakes, as none of them have any branching paths. Another 12 of the hexomenos have 3 red cells, 2 yellow cells, and 1 green cell. These are the hexomenos that are almost a snake, but have 1 cell that branches outwards. For 5 of these 12 hexomenos, that branching green cell is directly in the middle, which means the other 2 yellow cells do not border each other. For the other 7, the branching cell connects to 2 red cells, which means both of the yellow cells do border each other. 4 of the hexomenos contain an even split of red, yellow, and green cells, and all 4 of these hexomenos contain exactly 2 instances of the P pentomino. The pointer and top hat both have their pairs of yellow cells and green cells connected to each other, while the fighter jet and the hurricane have both of theirs in the checkerboard pattern. Then we have category 4, which is only long P and the delta, both of which are 1 red, 1 green, and 4 yellow cells. And finally, category 5, or I guess categories 5 through 8, the lone exceptions. We have cross with 1 red, 1 cyan, and 1 yellow. The alpha with 2 red, 3 yellow, and 1 cyan. And finally, the 2 that are maybe the most interesting. The box contains 4 yellow cells and 2 green cells and is the only hexomino without any red cells. Then, finally, the dollar sign contains 4 red cells and 2 green cells and is the one hexomino without any yellow cells. Part 5. Chemical Formulas. So, in Pentomino Facts, I discussed which tetraomenos are contained in the pentominos. This time, I'm going to discuss which of the pentominos are contained in the hexomenos, except I'm doing it with a little bit of a twist. Basically, what this is take any hexomino. Take all 6 instances of a cell being removed from that hexomino. Discard whichever instances cause the cells to be split apart. Then, for the remaining ones, take the names of all of these pentominos, alphabetize them, and then group up duplicates. And there you have your pentomino chemical formula. Every single hexomino has a unique chemical formula, except for the bracket and the integral, which both form L2. Which is kind of cool that there's one exception, but also sucks because this is so close to being a valid naming system for the hexomenos. But that's fine because they get to have more interesting names, like bracket and integral instead. Anyways, here's the chemical formulas for all of them. 13 of them contain 2 pentominos, i.e. the same 13 that only had 2 red cells in the last part. For 5 of these, it's the same pentomino duplicated twice. For the other 8, it's 2 different pentominos. 12 of them contain 3 pentominos. Once again, it's just the same as the 3 red, 2 yellow, 1 green group. 3 of these 12 contain 2 instances of the same pentomino and one of another, aka the only symmetrical ones in this group, where the other 9 contain 3 different pentominos. 8 of the hexomenos contain 4 pentominos within them. Only 2 of those 8 contain 4 entirely different pentominos, being the delta and long P, paired up once again. 3 of them contain 3 different hexomenos, with 1 pair being doubled up, including fighter jet, pointer, and the cross. The last 3 have 2 pentominos doubled up, being hurricane, the dollar, and top hat. Then, the alpha is the only one that contains 5 pentominos, with the F and the P doubled up, alongside a single X. And finally, box contains 6 pentominos, a whole 4 instances of the P pentomino, and 2 U's. I'm going to speed through this next part real quick because otherwise it would take ages, so pause if you want to see everything individually. The X pentomino is in the least number of hexomenos, at only 2, followed by the I pentomino, which is only in 4. 2 pentominos are only in 5 hexomenos, being the W and the Z. 3 pentominos are in 6 hexomenos, being the T, the U, and the V. Jumping up, the P pentomino is in 8 hexomenos, most of them multiple times. The F pentomino is in 9 hexamonos. The N and the Y pentominoes are both in 10 hexamonos, and the L pentomino is in the most hexamonos at 11. Despite being in the most pentominoes, the L pentomino is not the most represented overall, because in most cases, hexamonos with the P pentomino contain 2 P pentominoes, which means P shows up the most distinct times in the hexamonos, at a grand total of 16 times. Part 6, drawing lines through the hexamonos. Out of the 35 hexamonos, only 8 of them can have a line drawn through them perfectly, with wiggle room on both ends. They are long I, long L, staircase, 3, integral, golf club, double N, and long F. 6 of the hexamonos can have a line, but it must pass through a specific point. They are delta, duck, long T, long Y, hurricane, and 7. Low 4, fighter jet, alpha, square root, and $sign are all locked to 2 or 3 points, which makes only one line possible. Then, bracket, seesaw, top hat, hook, and polar bear are also locked to a single line, except the line exclusively passes through the edges of cells. Finally, these 10 hexamonos cannot have a line pass through all of their cells. For 6 of them, this is obviously because they contain the T pentomino, which, as we learned in pentomino facts, T was the only pentomino where a line passing through it was impossible, so obviously any hexamono that contains it is also impossible. However, there are also 4 more hexamonos that are impossible that do not contain a T pentomino. Those 4 are uneven U, big L, long F, and heart. Alright, so we've covered all the facts that were in pentomino facts now, with the exception of pathfinding. So, it should be time for hexagonal pathfinding, right?
No.
Well, unfortunately no, because I in fact already covered that in my more hexagonal pathfinding video. So, if you do want to see what the hexagonal pathfinding solutions look like, go watch that video. However, to compensate for not doing that in this video, I have 2 new sections that should be fun. Part 7, Hexagonal Rooms. For this part, I will be imagining each hexamono as a room, and the goal is to place a light in the room so that the entire room is illuminated. I.e., which parts of the hexamono can you place a point in so that every single other part of that hexamono can draw a direct line to that point, without going outside of the borders of the hexamono. In the majority of hexamonos, this is possible. You can put a point somewhere within that hexamono so that every part of the hexamono can connect directly to it. In long I and the box, you can put it anywhere since they're rectangles. Duh. Both top hat and long hat have 2 cells where you can place the light anywhere in that cell, and everywhere in that hexamono can connect to it. A lot of hexamonos have exactly 1 cell in which it'll work, 10 in total. Long L, seesaw, fighter jet, pointer, alpha, big L, cross, uneven T, long T, and long Y. Every other hexamono needs it to be placed in more specific places in order to still illuminate the entire hexamono room. A handful of the hexamonos can have the light placed on any point in a straight line. They are hurricane, whose line passes through 2 edges, then delta, long F, high 4, low 4, double N, $sign, and long N, which can all be placed on 1 edge. Then, 2 of the hexamonos are restricted to having the light be placed in a very specific point, being duck and golf club, both of which require it to be right on a corner bordering 3 cells. The remaining 11 hexamonos unfortunately cannot have a light placed in them anywhere in order to illuminate the entire hexamono.
So that
However, we can optimize
Google.
these hexamonos in order to find the point within the hexamono to maximize the amount of places within that hexamono that can connect to that light. Of the remaining 11 hexamonos, 8 of them can be optimized to place a light so that it can connect to a maximum of 5.5 cells. For polar bear, heart, and the staircase, you can put this point anywhere on this line and it will connect to 5 cells and half of another cell. For instance, if you put it directly on the edge of either side of this line, then you can cut off a nice clean half cell on the other end. But if you put it in the middle of the line, it cuts off 2 equal quarters from both of these cells. Then, in the 7 hexamono, you can place it in 2 separate points, and either of these points cuts off half of a different cell. 3, uneven U, square root, and 1 all require it to be in a very specific point in a very specific corner so that it cuts off exactly half of a cell. 3 hexamonos remain, and all 3 of them can have it placed in a specific point so that 5 1/4 cell are illuminated. Integral and bracket can have the light placed in either of these 2 points, and it will cut off 3/4 of a cell. And finally, the most constrained of them all, hook, which requires the light to be placed in this specific spot, which cuts off half a cell here, and then another quarter of a cell here. Woo. Part 8. Cubes. With 6 cells, we can now make cubes with the hexamonos. We can also make a lot of other weird shapes too. But first, let's just
eat a picture.
That's better. For this specific section, let's assume that every single border of any cell that is between 2 hexamonos folds 90 degrees, and let's see what shapes we get. Well, firstly, any hexamono that contains an O tetramono is physically impossible to fold without either bending one of the cells or space-time reality itself. That means these 8 hexagonals are completely unable to fold whatsoever. When you try to fold them, they just become completely incomprehensible shapes. The only way you would be able to fold them would be to cut one of these 4 sides and have the 2 cells whose border you cut overlap. But even then, they clearly don't make cubes.
There are sides overlap.
For 2 of the hexagonals, when you fold each edge, they have 2 pairs of cells overlap. The long eye creates this ring thing with 2 opposite sides not filled in, while uneven cube has the 2 unfilled sides bordering each other. Next up, we have the largest category. 14 of the hexagonals almost create a cube, but have 1 pair of cells that overlap, which makes their final creation this sort of open chest looking thing. You could probably store a marble in these. Out of the 14, 3 of them have that overlapped cell be the bottom one, and those are hook, polar bear, and bracket. The other 11 all have one of the sides overlapped. Then, the remaining 11 hexagonals do all form valid cubes. You can see pretty easily for these 6 hexagonals, if you have the I tetromino and 2 cells sticking out on either side, the I tetromino creates a ring, and then the other 2 cells cover each exposed half on either side of the ring. For these other 6 hexagonals, it's a little bit harder to tell that they can create a valid cube, but I've come up with an easy to memorize cheat to tell if a hexagonal is a valid cube net. When we look at all of the hexagonals that do not form valid cube nets, almost all of them contain at least one of 3 pentominoes. The I pentomino, which is in these 4 hexagonals, the U pentomino, which is in these 6 hexagonals, and the V pentomino, which is in these 6 hexagonals. In fact, we can see that the 2 hexagonals that have 2 overlapped cells both contain 2 instances of band pentominoes, as long I has 2 I's and uneven U has a U and a V. For each of these hexagonals, you'll also always be able to tell which 2 cells overlap, as in all 3 cases of U, V, and I, it's the cells on the ends of that pentomino that overlap. If a hexagonal contains the U, V, or I pentomino, then it cannot create a valid cube net. If it doesn't, then it most likely creates a valid cube net. There are 3 exceptions of hexagonals that are not valid cube nets and do not contain U, V, or I pentominoes, and those are bracket, golf club, and long N. In all 3 of these cases, the 2 overlapped cells are on the ends of each hexagonal. So just remember UVI pentominoes and these 3 hexagonals, I guess. Since I went through all the effort of cutting these all out and making them into shapes, I thought that, of course I had to tape them into actual cubes. Or, well, I taped the 12 hexagonals that form cubes into cubes, and the remaining hexagonals that don't form cubes still got taped into whatever they create. I even did the fucked up hexagonals that don't fold whatsoever, even though they looked like complete garbage, but honestly, being an eldritch monster isn't so bad. Well, that's all the hexagonal facts I have. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Do not ask for hexagonal facts. There are 108 of them. That sounds like absolute hell to compile. 35 hexagonals was already enough. But yeah. Anyways, I also wanted to announce that I have a Tumblr now, so go follow that if you're interested. I don't really know how to use Tumblr, so we'll see how that goes. You can use it to ask me questions about anything though if you want, and I will probably use it just to post random stuff. I don't know. That's all though. See you later!
用恒生信用卡賺翻嚟嘅加分 dollars 喺全港15萬間線上線下商戶任你使，指定旅遊網站入邊過千航班換得，搭旺季用得，正價特價都得，零限制㗎。
旅行用埋 Travel Plus 仲賺全城最高7% 加分 dollars 回贈。
加分 dollars 橫使掂使都咁好使。而家到8月中，用恒生信用卡賺額外高達2900蚊加分 dollars， 立即登記。
借定唔借？
還得到
先好借。
This video is sponsored by Ripex. Each different musical scale, like the major scale, the minor scale, the Phrygian scale, the Lydian scale, they all have their own sound, their own tonality. And I think the best way to hear the difference between each scale, between each tonality, is to take the same bit of melody, the same musical extract, for example, the verse of Bohemian Rhapsody, and then change the scale that that piece of music is using so we can directly compare how one scale sounds compared to another. Now you might think, well, how can you change the notes of a piece of music? And that's actually made possible by today's sponsor, which is Ripex. With Ripex, I can isolate the vocal of Bohemian Rhapsody, and then also within the same piece of software, change and manipulate the notes that that melody is using. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to move the melody of Bohemian Rhapsody through 9 different musical scales. So let's start off by listening to the extract of Bohemian Rhapsody that we're going to be working with today. This is the extract in its original scale, B flat major, the major scale.
Just killed a man, put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead. Mama,
was originally in the major key, so I think the most obvious place to start is shifting it into the minor key, into the parallel minor of B flat minor. So the next scale we're going to look at is Lydian. Lydian is the fourth mode of the major scale. All you would need to know when you think about Lydian is that it's exactly like a major scale, but with the fourth degree sharpened or raised. So to adjust Bohemian Rhapsody into the Lydian scale, I have to go through and take all of the fourth degrees E flats and make them E naturals. And then I also need to adjust the harmony to paint us into that Lydian sound. And a good way of achieving a Lydian sound is to make sure we get that raised fourth note, that Lydian character note in the chords. So we got it here in C chord, the A minor chord, but also to make sure that we're not losing sight of what the tonic note is. So to do that, I'm putting a lot of these chords over a pedal tone of B flat. So our ears know B flat is definitely the tonic key. Mixolydian is exactly the same as the major scale, apart from the 7th degree has been lowered. Because the extract of Bohemian Rhapsody we're using only features the first 5 notes of the major scale, and Mixolydian and the major scale both have those notes in common, we don't actually have to change the melody at all here. All we have to do is adjust the chords. So to paint us into that Mixolydian sound, I'm going to make sure that that character note of Mixolydian, 7th degree, the lowered 7th, which is the only difference here between major and Mixolydian, I'm going to make sure that 7th degree features heavily in the chords, namely these A flat major chords. Version of the major scale, we can think of Mixolydian as a slightly darker version of the major scale. Not as dark as the minor scale by any means, but it's major with a slightly cooler, more laid-back edge. Now earlier we looked at what Bohemian Rhapsody would sound like if it were in the minor key, if it used the minor scale. But the thing I didn't mention is that when a song is in the minor key, there's actually more than one minor scale that it may use. On top of the natural minor scale, which is the minor scale I used earlier in the video, which you can sort of consider the default minor scale, another commonly used minor scale is what's called the harmonic minor scale. And the harmonic minor scale was actually developed to fix one of the issues that happens when you write minor key harmony, hence harmonic minor. And that issue is that we can't get a strong, perfect cadence resolution when we stick in the natural minor, because the 5 chord is a minor chord. So if we want that strong, perfect cadence resolution, which particularly in the classical era was a must-have, we must raise the 7th degree of the scale to allow us to have a major 5 chord, in this case F major. So as you can hear, by raising the 7th degree of the scale, this harmonic minor gives us a far more compelling and satisfying resolution from the F chord here to the B flat minor. But actually, by raising the 7th degree, we introduced a new problem, which was heard here in Bohemian Rhapsody when we descend from the note A to the note G flat. This is the harmonic minor's awkward, augmented second interval, and it's the awkwardness of this interval that actually led to the development of the third minor scale, the melodic minor scale. Raising the seventh of the natural minor fixes the harmony element of the scale, hence harmonic minor, but in turn impacts the melody element. So to fix the melody, we then use the melodic minor scale. Now, the melodic minor scale is known for being different on the way up and the way down, and that is because we're meant to use two different techniques for closing this gap, depending on the way the melody is travelling. When ascending up a melody, we are to raise the sixth degree, closing the gap, and when we descend down the melody, when we descend down the scale, rather than raising the sixth, we lower the seventh, once again closing the gap. So this is what Bohemian Rhapsody sounds like if we follow the convention of using the harmonic minor scale for the harmony and the melodic minor scale for the melody. So, as I mentioned earlier, I've been adjusting the melody of the vocal from Bohemian Rhapsody by using today's sponsor, which is the piece of software RipX. RipX allows you to isolate the stems of any piece of music, isolate each instrument. So what I've been doing is isolating the vocal from Bohemian Rhapsody, and then once I've got the isolated vocal, within RipX I can then manipulate the pitches of these notes. I can manipulate how long they are, auto-tune them, add vibrato, even build harmonies from the existing note. It's a really powerful piece of software and really amazing for remixing and adapting existing pieces of music. If you're interested, you can try out RipX for free. The next scale we'll look at is actually related to the harmonic minor. This scale is known as the harmonic major scale, and it's effectively the harmonic minor but with a major third instead of the harmonic minor's usual minor third. Or we could think about the harmonic major as being the major scale but with a flattened sixth. The most well-known piece of music that uses the Phrygian dominant scale is the traditional Jewish song Hava Nagila. Phrygian dominant is also used widely in Arabic music, where the scale is known as Hijaz Makam. So to adjust Bohemian Rhapsody into the Phrygian dominant scale, we need to make sure to lower that second degree of the melody, and we need to quite extensively rework the harmony to paint us into this quite far removed sound. And the main way that I'm going to do that is by contrasting B flat major, our tonic chord, with the chord A flat minor. The reason I'm using A flat minor a lot here is because it features both the lowered second and lowered seventh degrees of the scale, which are two of the main notes that differentiate major from Phrygian. So the last scale that we're going to change Bohemian Rhapsody into today is the infamous Locrian scale, or Locrian as some people say. The Locrian scale is the 7th mode of the major scale, and it's often described as an unusable scale because it's just really unstable. It doesn't want to stay in Locrian, and a big part of this is because the tonic chord we get in Locrian is a diminished chord. Diminished chords do not want to sit still, and therefore trying to use one as the point of rest in a song, the tonic chord, is very difficult. Compared to the major scale, Locrian lowers every degree of the scale apart from the 4th degree. So let's do that to the Bohemian Rhapsody melody, and as for the chords here, we're going to have to really engineer the chords here to hit home that this is B flat, because if we don't, because the Locrian scale is so unstable, we'll find that our ears start hearing a different note as the root note. So at every opportunity we're going to keep hitting home that B flat is our in 9 different scales. Let me know in the comments which scale you enjoyed the most, and if you can think of some other scales that I should explore in a future version of this video, then do let me know about those as well.
With cube face chords, specifically the faces of cubes, like a Rubik's Cube, but wrong, because it's pentameter pattern. This comes with its own challenges, completely different to the chords. Take this P, U, and D for example. When put around a corner, they all become the exact same shape. Unlike the cube pentameter and torus boards, this will remain a possibility for every single board size. There also is another issue with the P pentameter with these corners. Yeah, don't do that. What's happening here is that on cube face boards, there are places where 3 cells meet, which are each of the corners of the cube. However, the P has a corner where 4 cells meet, so the P just cannot exist around this corner in certain configurations. Where did that 5th cell go? Barnea. Anyways, due to this 3-cell corner, we now have 6 potential new pentameters. The A pentameter can be formed by the P, U, and V pentameters. The G pentameter can be formed by both the X and F pentameters. The J pentameter can be formed by the Z, F, and W. The M pentameter can be formed by the W or Y. The Q pentameter can be formed by L, N, and Y. And finally, the R pentameter can be formed by F, T, or N. There are now 2 pentameters named Q and R. Well, honestly, it doesn't really matter that much, because the torus cube and the cube face cube will never be on the same board, as they only exist in their respective shapes. Same with the R, of course. As for these 6 new pentameters that only exist on cube face boards, I've decided to showcase both solutions where these 6 pentameters are considered their own thing, bringing us to 18 pentameters, and solutions where they are not, with only the 12 pentameters, and letting them make these weird shapes that are not as fun, except for P is boring, Tuba Tuba Tune is where we start, where we only need the I and L pentameters to put our path in 12. Really simple to understand here. And 18 pentameter solutions, as both solutions are identical, containing the Y, F, P, and N pentameters, and then the L pentameter or the Q pentameter, depending on how you look at it. This gives a path of 27, where there are amazingly only 2 unused cells. Results in a path of 45. This uses every single pentameter except for U, V, and X. This solution has 6 empty cells, meaning creating a path of 46 could be possible by adding another pentameter and having 0 empty cells. Alternatively, it could be improved with just 9 pentominoes as well, but no better solution has been found. Now we have 5x5x5, which is the largest board size I'm going to talk about, because with every board size up on the cube face, you actually increase the number of cells by 6 times what they normally increase by when it comes to boards and square boards, so things start to get massive really quickly. The 5x5x5 with 12 pentominoes goes up to 60, using every single pentomino with quite a bit of empty space. That's pretty much inevitable with 150 cells. This is where having those extra 6 pentominoes now begins to make a bigger difference between these boards, as the 5x5x5 with the 6 extra pentominoes goes up to 63 instead of 60. This solution uses 15 of the 18 pentominoes, missing out on only Q, G, and N. Now this solution is absolutely crazy. I need you guys to understand that these 3D visualizations are only created by me after these solutions have been found. All of these solutions were made using the net, which, I mean, if you look solely at this net, do you really think you would be able to understand what is going on? I certainly don't, so I want to give serious props to the people that made these solutions. With that being said, let's now move on to the final boss of Pentomino Pathfinding, 3D Pentomino Pathfinding. Things get quite complicated here. To start off this section, I'm first going to talk about the actual 3D pentominoes and some of their properties instead of getting right into the pentomino pathfinding. Don't worry, pathfinding fans, we will get there. It's just better to familiarize yourself with the new This part is similar to the very easily transformed into 3D like so. In addition to these 12, there's also 11 more 3D pentominoes. Here are all of them. Man, so close to the exact same number of 3D pentominoes. Oh well. These new pentominoes are A, B, E, G, H, J, K, M, R, Q, and S. Firstly, just like pentomino facts, let's start with symmetry. Nearly every single pentacube has symmetry. Remember our fellow 2D pentominoes, and how 5 of them didn't have symmetry? Well, all 12 of them have symmetry in 3D. How? Right through the middle. This now means that the X and I pentacubes both have symmetry in all 3 planes. Of the 11 new pentacubes, J, E, H, and R all have no symmetry whatsoever. A, B, K, M, and Q all have one axis of symmetry. None of the new pentacubes have more than one axis of symmetry. However, just like the original 12 pentominoes, 3 of these pentacubes also have rotational symmetry, being M, S, and G, thus making M the only new pentacube to have both reflectional and rotational symmetry, which isn't too surprising considering it looks really similar to the X pentomino, but with one cell on top of the middle. When we look at the tetracubes, we now have an additional 2 tetracubes alongside the original 5 tetrominoes, being the symmetrical P and the asymmetrical A. We've already been over the pentacubes that are also pentominoes, and nothing changes with these new tetracubes, so let's only focus on the new pentacubes. The I tetracube is present in 0 of the new pentacubes, which isn't surprising, seeing as the I tetracube only stretches in one plane. Adding any cell anywhere to it would then make it only stretch in 2 planes, and all of the new pentacubes stretch in all 3. The O tetracube is only present in the Q pentacube, which also isn't surprising considering the O tetromino was only present in the P pentomino. The S tetracube is only present in 2 of the pentacubes, being H and R. The T tetracube is only present in 2. The P tetracube is present in the K, R, and Q, all once, and the M twice. And the K and S twice. And finally, the 8 tetracube is in a grand total of 8 pentacubes. J, E, H, and R all only once, and B, G, A, and Q all twice. Just like the first pentomino video, here's a chart that shows how many tetracubes are in every single pentacube. J, S, G, A, and H all contain only 2 tetracubes. K, E, B, and R contain 3 tetracubes. Then M and Q contain 4 tetracubes. Let's not leave out the original 12 pentomino turned pentacubes off this chart though. Here's the same chart containing all 23. I also made this utterly horrendous Venn diagram that shows which pentacubes contain which tetracubes. This is ugly and does not convey information well, so instead have this chart which shows them sorted into their respective groups instead. O and I still have the lead at 2 and 3 respectively, but now P has the third lead at 4. S stays directly in the middle with 6 pentacubes containing it. Meanwhile, T and A are tied at a grand total of 8 pentacubes containing them. And of course, just like last time, our runaway leader is L, which is in 13 out of the 23 pentacubes, over half of them. Now that we're more familiar with the 11 new pentacubes, let's now get into what most of you are here for. Pentacube pathfinding. 3x3x3 pentacube pathfinding only requires 2 pentacubes, the S pentacube and the U pentacube. Pause. These graphics. Well, not bad. I can't understand what's going on here. This sucks. You know what? We're gonna have to bring out the big guns. Yep, we're going into Minecraft for these. Who'd have thought Minecraft would be so good for 3D visualization? Anyways, I made a couple of these. There's these small versions, one in the open and one encased in glass, just so you can get a feel for what the blocks look like. I also made this much larger one that you can walk through so you can get a feel for that. Alright, with that out of the way, let's move up to 4x4x4. This one jumps up to 6 pentacubes, giving a final path of 32. There's the L on the bottom, K directly on top of it, Y on the far end, S on the left side, J on the right side, and finally P directly on the top. Once again, this is a pretty terrible graphic, so let's head back into Minecraft. Here we have it. Once again, 2 small ones, with one encased in glass. Then this big one that will now stop talking and traverse through. Pause at any time in order to understand it. Now we go up to the 5x5x5, and this grows quite a bit. This one has a final path of 54. This one contains the U, E, B, J, K, G, A, H, P, L, W, Q, S, and finally I. That's a total of 14 out of 23 pentacubes. This thing is a monster. Just like 3x3x3 and 4x4x4, here's 2 small versions. Although at this scale, you really can't tell anything. We gotta walk through it. get to the utterly mind-boggling 6x6x6, which has a power of 77. This is made with the W, J, P, I, E, H, K, R, L, F, G, N, A, P, M, P, B, Q, X, U, Y, S, and Z. This is every single one of the pentacubes, which is absolutely insane. Since this board uses every single pentacube, and this is already difficult enough to create as is, no board sizes above 6x6x6 have been attempted. And just like the others, this graphic is horrible at comprehending anything, so let's head back into Minecraft. I only made one smaller version from this because you can't really tell anything that's going on in the smaller version. You really just have to walk through it.
This video is sponsored by
is a weird name, right? What we're saying is it's like the Locrian scale, which is if B would just be with the white notes. But with this second mode of the harmonic minor scale, the one thing we change is rather than having this flat sixth note, and that's flat six in reference to the you would have in the major scale, like B major scale, rather than having a G natural, we have a G sharp in this mode. So, just like its very close cousin Locrian, this scale, Locrian Natural 6, is spooky, it's awkward, and very rarely used. I would say it's even more rarely used than Locrian, and Locrian is already an incredibly rarely cited scale. So, I couldn't find any songs that use Locrian Natural 6, but if you can, then do let me know down below in the comments. So let's move now on to the third mode of the harmonic minor scale, which is the Ionian augmented scale. Ionian just means the major scale, so effectively what we're saying is it's just like the major scale, so C major. We have augmented it. What's that mean? Well, in music, augmented usually means to raise the degree. So rather than G natural, G sharp. Just like the major scale, but raised. And that means that the augmented to try and like that C octave. So just like the previous scale, this is a very rare scale to see used as the foundation for a song. I couldn't find any examples really, but there is one use case you might find the scale in, and that is as what's called a chord scale. So we discussed chord scales in the previous video on the modes of the melodic minor. Basically, the chord scale system is when, if you were improvising over a song, rather than applying the same scale over every chord, you would apply a different scale to each chord that you encounter to sort of highlight the sound of that particular chord. And this scale, Ionian augmented, the third mode of the harmonic minor, is a chord scale for the major 7 sharp 5 chord. So to
Now, if you did watch that previous video on the melodic minor modes, then you'll be saying now, wait, in that last video you said that Lydian augmented would be the chord scale to play over this major 7 sharp 5 chord. And that's true, but the thing is, in this system, it's not like there's one scale that you can use over a given chord. Any given chord could have a few different scales played over it. And both Ionian augmented and Lydian augmented can work over a major 7 sharp 5 chord. They only have one note different, and that's the 4th degree, giving them both a slightly different flavour over this chord. As we've heard so far, each scale, each mode, evokes a different feeling or mood or emotion. But why does this happen? Well, a great way to start getting a better, holistic understanding of music theory is with Eric Fein's book, What You Need to Know Before You Learn Music Theory. Eric's approach to music theory is quite refreshing. He focuses on getting you to understand the overarching concepts that unify all music. Things like consonance and dissonance, octave equivalence, that sort of thing. The foundational elements of how we perceive music that ultimately are the reason we structure music theory the way we do. It's a great way to approach music theory for anyone who's traditionally found it quite intimidating. To find out more information on learning music theory, do follow the link down below. So now we arrive at the 4th mode.
This one has 2 commonly used names, and both of those names are associated with a European country. We have Ukrainian Dorian or Romanian Dorian. 2 different sort of national labels, but the same scale, which is effectively the Dorian scale, but raised 4th. So usually in D Dorian we have all of these white notes, and the 4th degree would be 1, 2, 3, 4. G natural. In Ukrainian Dorian, we're having a sharp 4. This scale is labelled as Ukrainian Dorian because it was often used in Duma, traditional Ukrainian epic poems performed by folk musicians known as kobza. For example, we can hear moments of the Ukrainian Dorian scale in this performance by Marko Fowler. And the scale is also part of Jewish klezmer music, sometimes referred to as Mishabera. Right, we have the 5th mode of the harmonic minor scale, and this time we actually have a scale that is pretty useful and pretty widely used. And you know, I use the word widely generously because it's still, you know, compared to something like the major scale, this is still a very rare beast. But compared to other modes of the harmonic minor, the melodic minor, this next scale is actually quite commonly used. And what we have is the Phrygian dominant scale, which is effectively a major version of the Phrygian scale. So the Phrygian scale is in E, all of the white notes from E to E. And the very sort of characterful sound of the Phrygian is the flat, an exotic sound for loading notes. So Phrygian is just like the minor scale with a flat 2. Phrygian dominant is just like Phrygian, but with a major third. Analyze when New York is in C Phrygian dominant. Dream Brother by Jeff Becker is in G Phrygian dominant. And for something completely different, both the songs Naughty Girl and Beautiful Liar by Beyonce are using the Phrygian dominant scale. As you can probably tell by how it sounds,
Phrygian dominant scale is commonly used in Arabic and Middle Eastern music, where they refer to the scale as Maqam Hijaz. Phrygian dominant's common use in Middle Eastern music has led to Western composers and songwriters reaching for it as an easy way to evoke a Middle Eastern sound. For example, Muse use it in the instrumental interlude of United States of Eurasia to add a Middle Eastern flavour to the music. So, onto the penultimate mode of the harmonic minor scale, and this time we have this scale. This is the Lydian sharp 9 scale. So it's just like Lydian, which would be all of the white notes from F to F. The 9th degree, or what you could think of as the 2nd degree, it's either the 9th up there or the 2nd down there, not much difference really. The 9th degree has been raised up, sharpened. And what you may have noticed is that actually winds up giving us offensively the minor third and the major third. Because although technically we're calling this the sharp 9s, that would be a G sharp and the augmented 2nd degree. In practice, it really is just the minor third, right? It's a flat. So we now have a scale that has both the minor third and the major third, which is quite a curious sound. For example, the Beatles' Blue Jay Way could be considered a Lydian sharp 9 scale. You're probably still going to notate it as E flat because it's a bit easier for a musician to understand what's going on, because it's going to sound like a minor third. So ideally we want to transcribe it as a minor third, which would be E flat, not D sharp. So that takes us to the final mode of the harmonic minor scale, the ultra Locrian. The 7th mode of the major scale is Locrian. The 7th mode of the melodic minor is super Locrian. Here we have ultra Locrian, which you could also refer to as super Locrian double flat 7, because it's the same as super Locrian, but the 7th degree has been flattened not once, but twice. So, once again, exotic sounding, dark sounding, not particularly useful, but we can use it as a chord scale. Like we were talking about earlier, a chord scale is, we can use it as a chord.
Where ultra Locrian is 7 flats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Yeah, 7 flats.
Chord scale, like we were talking about earlier, a chord scale is a scale you use over just one chord when you're improvising, and that chord here, for example, will be the diminished 7 chord. Now we refer to this degree here as the double flat 7 because it's the 7th degree of the scale, and ideally in a scale you want one of each alphabetical note, but it might be easier to think of the double flat 7 as the natural 6th. So we have the flat 6 here and the natural 6. And also you can think of the flat 4 here as the major third, the natural third. So this scale has both the minor and major third and the minor and major 6th. So that is the modes of the harmonic minor scale. As
the first 6 tiers. The first 3 colors of multiplier game, and the 6th ascension. almost to the power of Route 2 now. Fahrträger Testwagen durch Spain. It has a lot. Route 2. There's a run to a power Route 2 that is 500. Promote with LP station and Ascensions.
Ciao.
Bye.